says a froward man. People in our world today look at being froward as though it were an asset or one of those things that is a bad thing but is being spun into a good thing, right? Like stubbornness is rebranded steadfastness, right? Being froward or indiscreet is rebranded as being bold, right? It's just a way of taking something bad and making it into something virtuous, right? We all know that the Bible says that a wife should be discreet, which is the opposite of froward. But the Bible also says a virtuous man is to be discreet, right? One of the reasons Joseph was picked to lead Egypt was because he was discreet, right? So being discreet is a virtue both for men and women. But in our world today, it's considered virtuous to be bold. But bold is usually just another word for rude, right? Or froward. A froward man sows strife. A whisperer separates chief friends. An ungodly man digs up evil. When we see this term digs up, it's talking about an evil that has been buried, right? In order to dig something up, it has to first have been buried, right? The Bible says that when a person is saved and redeemed, their sins are cast in the depths of the sea. This is talking about someone that is trying to retrieve them, to bring them back up from the depths of the sea, right? Why would people want to do that? The reason is, if evil is common rather than rare, then the evil person doesn't see themselves as quite so evil. It's the, well, you did this defense. It doesn't deal with any wrong that they don't have to deal with any wrong that they're doing if they can bring everyone to that level. Right? If I don't have any, if something is bad, then I am going to take the alternative and try to make it seem worse. And in order to do that, one has to go digging. Right? One has to go digging. Also, to use Scripture again. See, here's the problem. Psalms 14 and 7 says, all that hate me whisper together against me. Against me do they devise my hurt. Right? How or why would gossip separate friends, or those who are in fellowship one with another? Notice everyone doesn't whisper together. All those, in Psalms 41 and 7, it says, all those that hate me whisper together. Now, I don't want you to get caught up on just all those that hate me. I want you to get caught up on the fact that those that whisper together share something in common. And in this particular case, it was all those that hate me. Right? It might be something else. All those that share something in common. All those that share a dislike for something. They get together with themselves and whisper together. Right? Together. Gossips know who to talk to and who to not talk to. Right? A gossip Test. There we go. Sorry about that up there. Yeah. As we were saying, a gossip doesn't talk to everyone. They know who to talk to, and they know who not to talk to. All those that hate me whisper together. Right? They have their circle. On social media, some people strive to create a world where everyone in that world is exactly like them. They don't want to engage with anyone who is not exactly like them. So they curate a circle that is people that is just like them. And the problem with this is, of course, that they begin to convince themselves that that is how the whole world is, because that is how their circle is that they have created. Anything that comes into that circle that doesn't belong is shoved out. Right? Why? So that those can whisper together, right, against me. A gossip can only talk to like-minded people. Words paint a picture of something. And if you like the picture the gossip is painting with their words, then you will seek out anything or anyone that would change that picture and get rid of them. Right? Words paint pictures. We have a whole Revelation chart that is a painted picture drawn from words. Words paint pictures. And if the picture the gossip is painting is something you like, then you are together with that gossip. And if it's something you don't like, then even the gossip knows it's something you don't like, and they don't want to deal with that. This is how factions are created in churches, in families, and everywhere else. This is how gossip separates chief friends. Right? Gossip is not a little thing. It's a tool of evil. It creates strife, it creates division, and it creates mistrust. It's designed to try to get a certain outcome, right? When a person's sins have been forgiven, that sin is not to be used as a tool to try to affect anything in the future, right? But now I'm going to go the other way for just a little bit, right? Scriptures against gossip are not to be used for people to avoid accountability or responsibility for things they've done. It was very recently we heard that story of someone who was about to get out of prison. Remember this? Somebody who was about to get out of prison because their time was done for the crime that they had been convicted of. But they knew they had committed other crimes. They had committed other crimes that the state didn't know about. And if they just keep their mouth shut, they could go free. Brother Allen, tell me if I get the gist of this wrong, because I'm just remembering it from the message. But their conscience wouldn't allow them to do that. So they confessed and wound up in prison, I don't know, for a lot longer. But if they just kept their mouth shut, they could have been out. Now, someone might argue that if this person had gotten saved, then God had taken their sins and put them in the depths of the sea not to be remembered, and they didn't have to confess it to man because God had forgotten it. But that is bad logic. That is not sound at all. Right? When the thieves were on the cross with Jesus, we know one of them was going to be with Jesus in paradise.
In other words, they had gotten right with God. They said, he said, we're suffering here justly for what we've done. And Jesus said to him, today you will be with me in paradise, right? Whereas the other one was just interested in what Jesus could do to get them down from the cross. In other words, one of them said, Jesus, use your power to get us down from the cross. There's people in jail today that want to use their Christianity as a tool to get them out of jail. Same thing. But the righteous one said, we're here justly. And Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise. But he didn't say, today we're going to get down off this cross because what you've done is now not being remembered. Right? When he said, we're here justly, Jesus didn't contradict him. Right? If there is a spiritual issue, then you should seek spiritual counsel. If there is a criminal issue, you need to call the police. This has to do with sexual abuse. That is a matter of sin, but it's also a matter of crime. Right? You can seek spiritual counsel for spiritual matters, but the criminal justice system exists to take care of criminal matters. The idea that people use scriptures about gossip to say, hey, don't talk about bad things that happen. Why? Because it may harm the reputation of the institution. You may harm a criminal's life. Right? If somebody murders someone, you don't say, hey, let's not tell the police about this because if they get arrested, it might ruin their life. You concern yourself with the victim and not the criminal. Now, I had something happen even in relation to this where a minister told me, I'm not going to tell you who, you may or may not know them, but said, hey, if somebody confessed some kind of sexual abuse or physical abuse to me, I would report it to the police. And I thought, well, that's good. But then they absolutely ruined it by telling me the reason why they would report it to the police. They absolutely ruined it and made themselves, to me, a disgusting person. They said, I would report it because if I didn't, I could get in trouble. Think about that for a minute. Where is their concern? I would report this because there's a threat to me if I don't. Where's the concern for the victim? Where's the concern for doing what's right? No, I would do the right thing, but only for the motive of me. Right? The Roman Catholic Church has gotten in a lot of trouble with this, as we all are aware. But sometimes people would rather talk about indulgences in the Middle Ages than talk about the Catholic Church's current problems, because sometimes people don't want to deal with problems closer to home by bringing up those problems. In other words, it's a lot easier to talk about indulgences in the Middle Ages than it is to talk about things going on in the Roman Catholic Church today, because what if people say, well, I know of something similar that happened here. And whatever judgment you put upon them needs to be the same. That goes for anyone or anything. Anytime you render judgment, it doesn't change based on who it's directed at. That's the definition of principle, right? That's the definition of principle. The Southern Baptists are having a similar problem, right? And it all stems, the thing that they all have in common is this: a desire to protect the institution more than the individual. That is a key that runs through it. Whether it's Roman Catholic or Baptist or anyone else, the desire is to protect the institution rather than the individual. But a true minister of God is a minister who's looking out for souls, not organizations. So the welfare of the individuals in their council is the most important thing. Not the institution, not the school, not the congregation, and not themselves. Decisions and counsel that godly counselors give should always be in the best interest of the person seeking counsel and not in the best interest of the organization. Right? Because it's the individual that comes for counsel, not the organization. So say something that is in their best interest. When someone wants to tell the truth about a crime, they are not engaged in gossip. Right? Gossip is about sins that have been placed in the past, and someone is going to go on with their life because that's what God intended. When you get saved, God intends that you have a fresh start in life. And therefore, those that pull against that are pulling against the will of God. Those that want to hold you accountable for sins in the past in order to manipulate the present, that's gossip that this is talking about. Right? That's gossip that this is talking about. But unresolved criminal acts are not something that should be left buried in the past. As the story we heard illustrated, when someone came forth and confessed a crime, confessed a murder that they had done, that the government didn't know anything about, let's be clear, that was the right thing to do. Right? Their conscience told them to do it, and their conscience was right. Right? You hear stories of people getting saved in prison, and then the governor of certain states saying, well, their sentence should be commuted because they got saved. Well, that's the opposite of what this story illustrated. And it's the opposite of what Jesus did with the thief on the cross. Because a guy turns to God doesn't mean that his sentence was commuted. Jesus didn't do that on the cross. Right? There are sins and there are crimes. Now, crimes are sins. Not all sins are crimes. Right? Not all sins are crimes, but all crimes are sins. There is a separation. There is a separation. If something is both a sin and a crime, then get spiritual counsel and get the criminal justice system involved. If something is a sin but not a crime, then talk to your pastor. Talk to your spiritual counselor. Get things worked out. Because God wants to take sin and bury it in the depths of the sea. God wants you to have the opportunity to proceed with life from a fresh start. God wants that. God's people want that. Sometimes gossips don't want that, but God wants that. So get that worked out, right? Gossip is not a little thing. It's an evil tool that creates strife and division. Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1 and verse 29. It says, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignancy, whisperers. Notice whisperers or gossips is kept in company with all these other things. Because in the big scheme of things, it's just as destructive as many of those things. Right? Verse 30 says, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful. We can't, of course, deal with all of these things in a Sunday school lesson. You could preach a whole message on each one of these things that has been mentioned if you really wanted to. But I want to pick out something that's not usually picked out, and that is malignant. Up in verse 29, malignant. Malignant is a term that's referred to something that spreads. Right? If you go in for a biopsy on something and it turns out to be benign, you're okay. But it's not such a happy diagnosis if it turns out to be malignant. Right? Because what benign means, it's stable. Malignant means it's on the move. It's spreading. Gossip tends to be malignant. It's not contained in one area. Sometimes you might think it's contained, but it's got tentacles. Think of a cancer cell. It's not just a cell, it's got tentacles coming out. It's reaching in all directions. Right? That's why gossip has to be dealt with, because gossip is malignant. Malignity and whisperers, right? Causing evil to spread. How can it be treated? How's cancer treated? Right? First of all, if you have cancer, you need to nip it in the bud if it's at all possible. Because the earlier you detect it, what? The more likely it is that it can be fixed, cured. Right? Don't be this is a side note, but don't be one of these people that never ever goes to the doctor. And then you're in real trouble, and you go to the doctor, and it's stage 4. Why? Because you never went to the doctor before. You waited till it was really, really impacting you. And I know I'm speaking to myself. I don't like to go to the doctor. I tell my doctor, if I'm in here to see you, it means that my arm is broken or that blood is shooting out or something. I don't just come in because I have a headache, usually, right? And it seems like men in particular avoid going to the doctor unless it's really necessary. But when you get to our age, up in your 50s, you might want to lower that threshold just a little bit, right? I'm trying to do that, but it's difficult. Because you want to nip things in stage 1 rather than stage 4. Right? It's sad when everybody goes to the doctor and say so-and-so has cancer, and it's the first you've ever heard of it, and it's stage 4. Why? They only just found out about it. Why? Because they never went. Yeah, they could miss it. You could miss it. But a lot of times people avoid going. Right? We want to deal with gossip before it's stage 4. Right? If it's in a family, if it's in a congregation, if it's in a movement. How many people, if they think subconsciously or psychologically, if I just ignore it, it'll be okay? Right? We've got to avoid doing that in a spiritual sense. Seeing a problem and just saying, I just don't want to deal with it. If I ignore it, maybe it'll just clear up on its own. I guess that's possible, but not if it's malignant. Gossip needs to be handled in the bud. The earlier the better. The less disruption there'll be, right? The less disruption there'll be. Gossips seek to manipulate situations and people because wicked people want the rest of the world to be wicked with them. So they'll constantly be looking for what's wrong with other people because they want everyone to be on their level. Because if everyone is on their level, then they don't feel bad. Does that make sense? Right? Sometimes when you see someone that's just critical of everyone and everything, really they don't think a lot of themselves. And they're mentally trying to put everyone else on the same level as them because that will make them feel better. That's the motive behind gossip that can lead you to have some kind of empathy and compassion for it, which is always a good thing, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be dealt with. Right? So, it's a little early, but sometimes I accidentally stretch things out to 35 instead of 30. So today we're going to stop at 25 because our notes are at an end. But we thank you, and I owe you one until 35, maybe next week.